One of the great things about being an ombudsman, especially for a larger organization, it isn't just being kind of a passive recipient of people coming to you and listening to their concerns. As an ombuds, I actually sat on various committees, the HR committee, the ER hotline committee, all of these different committees. We used to actually sit down and discuss policy before it was even implemented. I give a classic example of COVID, right? What was such a great synergy and partnership between human resources and ombuds, we were involved before the implementation of it to say, how do you think the employees will feel about the implementation of this, or what are you hearing? And so we used to actually in real time give feedback.
Welcome to Vibecast, the podcast that dives deep into the heartbeat of workplace culture. I'm your host, Kristi Skutvik. Join me in conversations with extraordinary leaders as we unravel their experiences, both positive and negative, that have impacted workplace culture. This podcast is more than storytelling. It's about actionable insights. Are you ready to transform the vibe at your workplace? Let's go. You know how every organization has that moment where something feels off, but no one's quite saying it out loud? Maybe it's tension on a team, a leadership gap, or just that quiet feeling that the culture isn't quite what it could be. Now imagine having someone whose entire role is to step into these moments with neutrality, with trust, and with the ability to actually help people navigate what's hard. That's exactly what Sana Majeshwar has built her career around. Her background is one of the most unique and honestly, one of the most impactful I've come across. She brings together organizational psychology, employment litigation, HR, coaching, mediation, and ombuds work, and has turned that into something incredibly powerful inside organizations. She's built and led ombuds programs across 6 continents, from small companies to Fortune 200 organizations, working in places like Angola, Argentina, Kazakhstan, Canada, the UK, and the US. And most recently, she served as a global ombuds leader at Chevron, helping guide workplace culture across some of the most complex international environments you can imagine. But what really makes Sana's work so interesting isn't just the scale, it's the role she plays inside organizations. She helps leaders and employees navigate conflict before it becomes something bigger. She builds systems that create safe, trusted spaces. And she brings a level of emotional intelligence and cultural awareness that's needed now more than ever. In this conversation, we talk about what an ombudsman actually is, because I didn't know, and why it might be one of the most important roles in shaping workplace cultures today. We get into conflict, communication, leadership, and what it really takes to build environments where people can show up, speak up, and actually feel supported. So let's get into it. Well, Sana, thank you for joining me. I feel like we became fast friends at the Gig Talent Conference, and I'm just so intrigued by the work that you've done, the work that you're doing, and I'm excited to have you because I feel like more people need to know about your craft and how it impacts vibes. So thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I knew right away when I saw you and your story that we definitely had a common ground here and what we like to impact in the world.
Yes, for sure, for sure. So what I want to do is just start off the conversation, as I do with each guest, of just helping us understand your definition of vibes and vibes in the workplace. Like, what does that mean? How would you define it? How does it show up? I'd love to hear from your voice.
Well, thank you. It's a great question. I have to say, I actually listened to all of your prior podcasts, and I was super inspired by the history of your speakers and their definition of vibe. And I did find a common theme, actually, which you may not actually have thought about. Um, a common vibe, which I feel is impactful in the workplace, and I think is really my vibe that I like to bring to work every day, is bring your best self to work every single day. And it's kind of 2 things, is 1, bring your best self to work, but 2, make sure you're doing your part to make sure that everybody feels as if they can feel safe to speak up at work. And I can't tell you how powerful that impact is, and that's really what kind of got me addicted to what I do for a living, and, it's some crazy, crazy, lifestyle, decision choices as a family to stay in this profession, so I'm looking forward to sharing that with you.
Yeah, I can't wait. I can't wait. So, okay, I have a couple questions there because this idea of bringing your best self to work, it could be like we were talking before we pressed record, like what a wild morning, right? So like how can I bring my best self to work and care about other people and other people feeling safe when like maybe that's what I need today. I need somebody to care about me and feel, make me feel safe. And how do I bring my best self when I'm just like completely discombobulated from the morning, right? Of kids or whatever comes your way, family, dog, whatever, right? Like how how does that work in your opinion?
So, I guess I feel very blessed that for the last, honestly, 15 years, but the last 11 years I was working for Chevron in Houston. And people always remember me for this one thing. I always used to say this, and I still say it today. I genuinely used to skip to work every single day, despite the fact that as an ombudsman, I was listening to issues for a living. And people can say, how can you always be so positive when you're listening to issues for a living? What I did every single day was recognize that when I walked through those doors, I was doing everything I could to make sure I was grounded before I even walked into the building so that I felt as if I could bring my best self to work. And it didn't always happen, right? The story that we, just sharing this morning, with our children and our families and the chaos that there is, you don't leave your identity and your emotions and what has happened to you um, behind when you walk into the office every day. But what you can do is ground yourself and say, I'm going to practice being present and I'm going to practice showing my best self and controlling what I can to help people in the workplace who, in my situation, I was helping them when they themselves were experiencing barriers at work and in a particular situation. So to me, it's about grounding. It's super important to ground yourself before you walk into the office. But I think it's really important as well that as a leader, you have to recognize that everyone has their own story and has their own personal consequence history. And sometimes they are projecting what they have been experiencing at home, and they can't help it, but they're going to project what they're experiencing and bring that to the workplace as well. So, as a leader, I think for you to truly help others to bring their best self to work, it's important to truly look to seek and understand and truly see the people and their needs and make them feel seen and heard for who they are and meet them where they are. And that's really the only way you're going to get the best out of them. And they'll want to feel motivated to work with you, work for the company. There's so many things that you can do as a leader and personally to make that happen. It's not one thing, it's kind of many things that you can do.
Yeah, right. And okay, so there's this word that I had never heard before and I felt so like drawn to you because I'm like every company needs that, right? So and you just said it, ombudsman. And this is the business that you're in. So like tell us what that is, how you came to be in that role. Like I want the world to know these things and people to know that there's opportunity for this to be within their organization to actually um help with what they're doing, help people show up as their best self, help people work through conflict and the things that are going on within them. So, start us like at the very basics of like ombudsman. What is this and how did you roll this out into the world?
Well, I wish I could take sole credit, but Um, yeah, I keep a book on my table here. I can do a plug. If you don't know or want to learn more about an organization ombudsman, I highly recommend this book. It's called The Organizational Ombuds. It's by Chuck Howard, who is actually, I say, the guru of ombuds. If you want to talk about somebody who, as a litigator and an employer and attorney, myself, he's also an attorney, and he truly identified what the barriers are within organizations and what an ombudsman organization can do to help organizations to remove any type of risk that they have within an organization by filling this, what I call this a gap. You can fill this gap as a safety valve where employees can go to when they feel that they're stuck or they feel as if they've got barriers to their employee experience. The ombuds, it's a ombudsman is short as ombuds. The ombuds is a completely confidential, off the record, independent from the organization, impartial, meaning we don't take sides, and informal, meaning anything that's shared with ombuds stays with ombuds, a bit like Vegas. And we, unless it's imminent threat of serious harm, like serious harm, and honestly, I've been doing this 15 years and I've only breached confidentiality 5 times, and that was because of imminent risk of personal harm. I didn't want to be the judge of that, of whether they would move forward. But otherwise, everything that's shared with ombuds stays with ombuds. And what we do is provide that safety valve, that pressure release valve when employees just want to brainstorm solutions completely off the record and figure out, do I surface this? Do I say something to human resources, to my supervisor? Do I surface it to the hotline? So we helped to navigate the internal processes and formal channels and figure out, do I surface it or not? And if so, we give them the tools to be able to voice their concern wherever they want to, however they want to, so that they can bring their best self to work, feel as if they can be productive. I mean, it's such you as a coach, you know what I'm talking about, that unlocking that you see when you're working with someone who's stuck.
Internal therapist, but like for work, right? Or maybe personal life. Like you said, there's like personal things we can't just leave things at the door, right? That's just like not humanly possible. So sometimes, I mean, I find this with my kids. They just want to like talk through something. They don't necessarily want my advice. Sometimes they do, or they're just like, "Hey, what should I do in this situation?" Or, "Hey, can I just like play out a conversation I want to have?" And then they go on their merry way, whether or not they have the conversation, whether or not they do it. So I don't know, do ombuds like follow up and follow the journey of the things that come to them? Or how does this work? And how is this different from, an organization that might have like an employee relations function or I
Or
guess most
EAP or therapy or exactly. That's a great question. Yep.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Like, how do you identify, or how does this work in conjunction with or in parallel with those other things that are maybe set up within an organization?
So we get this question all the time, and I think the best distinction I can say is that it is not a replacement, it is a complement to the existing channels which are there within the organization. So, to your question, you said, so, you know, how would it play out? Would we follow up? So, the best way give it is really, let's talk about an example.
Sure, great. I love stories.
So let's say, you we're talking about the situation this morning, right? I'm yeah, you're trying to bring your best self to work. And let's say you're working for an organization and you're not sure whether you should tell your supervisor, whether you're having some challenges at home that may be precluding you from being able to focus today. Maybe your child is sick or something is happening, and you're like, do I say something? You're not don't have an open relationship with your supervisor yet, and it's something that's been bothering you for a while and it's really distracting to you. And you're wondering, do I say something? So then you think, well, maybe I can call the ombudsman. Now, the ombuds is actually distinguishing from therapy and hotline and all of these other channels are there. The ombuds really only deals with work related concerns, right? So we are not therapists. I would say the best, we do feel like one. I do have a psychology background. I do have a litigator background, but I probably need therapy myself on a regular basis, right? It's just something you should always have therapy for your mental health and your support. Absolutely. But what Ombuds does is we help that person to truly kind of like an onion. We peel back an issue spot and figure out what are the concerns that you're having. How do you have the conversation with your supervisor? Let's role play whether you should have a conversation with your supervisor or what's precluding you from having that conversation with your supervisor. Or have you thought about EAP? Or maybe even think about EAP for your child because the Employee Assistance Program is a great resource that's sometimes available to family and to children as well. So we can navigate those conversations and walk through is this an HR issue? Is this a hotline issue? Is this, what resources are available to you, right? So we go through that process and brainstorm solutions, but then it isn't a kind of, okay, thank you for that information and I'm done. We actually would want you to feel as if you're bringing your best self to work and continuing to do that. So we would schedule a follow up at least 2 weeks out or 1 week out to say, how are you doing? Did your strategy work? And ultimately, success for ombuds is when, if there is an issue that is so serious that let's say frankly, if it's sexual harassment or that type of situation, ideally the organization from a risk mitigation perspective, we would want to do something to help that person feel safe to speak up, but also proactively, if it's something that's a trend and there's more than one woman or coming forward with regards to that type of an issue, we would want to do proactive training and for supervisors and others to make sure we're addressing that issue proactively so that it's not something that becomes a larger systemic issue for the organization. So
So you do look at like the trends of people coming to you to understand like systemically if there's more to these things than just like this one-off conversations that people want to have. That's amazing. Yeah. So you can kind of address them ahead of time. I love that.
and then what happens is we ideally the position should report to the highest person within the organization, right? So ideally the person should at least have a dotted line to the CEO. Administratively, ideally, yes, they do sit in sometimes in HR and compliance, but should always have access to the senior most person in the organization. Because what if the issue, let's say it's harassment, let's say it's bullying of a kind from a very senior employee, and it's a trend and people are not feeling safe to speak up. We would want the senior most person in the organization would want to know where this issue is and would want to address it proactively because that kind of a ripple effect on the organization can have such an impact on the organization and the results and the culture. So that dotted line of the ombuds to senior management is such an important relationship because we capture these trends and then we can say, that these are the types of issues we've been hearing. We don't capture names, we capture types of issues. And we are that data point beyond the employee data, beyond the employee relations data, the hotline data, the EAP data to say, this is a part of the culture that you may not be seeing and may not be bubbling to the surface because people are afraid to actually report it.
You're like the ultimate vibe check of the organization.
Vibe check. I like that. I think I should change it. I'm going to call myself the Vibe Master.
The vibe master, the chief chief vibe officer. I mean, that's ultimately what you are, is you're like this like uh, this is the only thing that comes to mind, like the squishy part in the middle, right? Like you have the data based on conversations to make data driven decisions, but it's based on the feelings of the organization, right? And it's really hard to capture. This is like what I've been after for so long, because it's really hard to capture the feelings of an organization, the energy of an organization through a survey or through, right? Like or through HR or compliance. Like it's really, really, really hard. There's this other there's Kate Molman I spoke with on one of my podcasts. I'm not sure if you listened to that one. She works for Floyd Consulting, and they have the book The Dream Manager. And so this is like this other component of like the vibe officer in an organization is helping people explore their dreams. But it's really hard to explore your dreams if you're coming to work not showing up as your best self, right? So it's like an ombuds almost comes first, and then the dream manager comes second. Because once you unwind some of the things that people are feeling, they can start to realize bigger and better things for themselves. So, um, where was I going with that? But anyways, I just
Yes, and she was doing exactly that. She was helping to role model that if you can dream, then you're also helping your team to feel that why shouldn't you dream too?
right, right. And then that like positive mindset like spirals within an organization in the best way, so that then you start to create the energy and the vibe that you want within an organization just by having some like safe conversations, which seems so simple, and yet organizations don't think about this very often, I think. Okay, so take me back to your story of like, how did you find yourself in this role, right? So you were a litigator, you have a history here, and it's not talking through your resume, but like tell us this story of like how you wound up where you're at, and like any defining moments along the way where you're like, that is where I'm headed.
So I feel as if when you go to school, when you're growing up, people ask you, what do you want to be when you grow up? And at no point would I said, I want to be an organizational ombudsman, right? It's just no idea. Which I love that my daughter calls me ombuds mum. So she knows exactly, she knows what it is. And she would know what to say if she wanted to be an ombuds. Fortunately, she's going to probably be choosing a different path. But I actually have always been, and I didn't realize that it was, but I have always been an ombuds in a sense. And whether you call it, a conflict doctor, or you call it someone who's a speak up culture, or the vibe master. And I feel like, Kristi, you're the same. I think that's why probably you and I immediately had that connection, right? Is there are people who have innate empath instincts, who have an ability to connect with people, but are people who people feel comfortable going to when they feel stuck in any situation. And honestly, as far back as I can remember, probably early as living honestly, in London in high school, being 16. And I remembered being that person that someone came to when they felt that the school was not respecting them, when they were stuck and trying to observe a religious holiday, and they were afraid to say anything, thinking, well, I'm not the majority religion. Should I say something? Should I not? And I think that's why I chose to be a lawyer, because I thought, well, lawyers are advocates. We take care of people. Um, and so when I had, as early as 16, I kind of had this inner need to help people. And so I helped her to find her voice to then speak up to the formal channel, being the school administration. And we did end up helping to implement not a school holiday, but a space where people could celebrate that holiday, which previously was not celebrated. And then I went to McGill in Montreal and studied psychology, again, thinking I'm going to help people. Um, Thinking maybe, law, and still exploring myself and where I want to go. But instead, I fell into human resources. And in the human resources function, I was finding people were coming to me not just to, fill out those I-9s and forms, but because they felt, they're complaining about, well, this one's got, with my first case, this one's got a smelling issue. I don't know whether we can have it. I have to look past like I do with the odor control. Imagine that, fresh out of college, 21, I have to give an odor control type of conversation as a first-time HR manager. It's like, great. But I was that person who people felt safe to have that conversation with. Conflict between people, people feeling as if they were not progressing in their careers. I just really loved helping people when they felt stuck. So it always happened, even when I became an employment attorney, even though, yes, I was practicing law, I was defending corporations as a defense litigator. So I was representing cases where it may have been the corporation that was defending a lawsuit against plaintiffs, etc. But I still, within the law firm, was helping people who felt stuck. Then somebody reached out to me, and I was a new mother and working crazy hours. And somebody reached out to me and they said, "We think you'd make a great ombudsman, and we're looking for an attorney with a nice disposition to do this role." And I'd never heard of an ombudsman, organization ombudsman before. And I said, "Well, if it requires me working less hours, then I'm happy. I'll go for it." So let me do this interview. And I went for the interview, and I gave all the wrong answers on what an organization ombudsman was. I said, "Well, I can do great position statements. I can do investigations." And he goes, "You don't actually know what an organization ombudsman is, do you?" I said, "Well, I looked it up on Google as to what an ombudsman was. I didn't know about the International Ombudsman Association. I didn't know about all of this amazing profession." And what I discovered, what he shared with me, is that this is a safe space where people can voice their concerns. And you would be the person who, me, as he was the chief compliance officer, he said, "You just let us know when you think there's something which is a systemic issue. And as an attorney, we feel we can trust that you'd have the right judgment to know that this would be something that would be a concerning trend that we should be aware of and the audit committee should be aware of, to proactively address and help our organization to mitigate this risk." So I said, "Wow, I had no idea that this is what we do." And I said, "Well, sure, this sounds great." I said, "But I didn't give the right answer." So he said, "It's okay." So I said, he said, we really enjoy this interview." And I said, "That's great." I said, "How long have you been looking for an attorney with a nice disposition for?"
It almost sounds like the Mary Poppins ad. The Mary Poppins ad, right? Like, it talks about the disposition. Anyways, I just saw Mary Poppins. So that's what it makes me think of this very niche, particular person.
Yeah, yeah. So I was like, "Okay, this sounds great. 2 years apparently in New York City, you can't find an attorney with a nice disposition, but if it requires me working less hours and I get to see my newborn, why not? Let's give it a shot. And if I don't like it, I'll go back to being an employment litigator again." And 15 years later, I'm doing this work. And honestly, it is probably the most rewarding profession I've ever been in. I I still get calls from people from 15 years ago, from when I worked in Bernstein. I get calls all the time from people within Chevron who say, "I'm so glad that we had that conversation." And they quote you, and I don't even remember what I had said. I'm like, "Oh, really? I said that. That's great."
Yeah, the impact you have on them.
And it was just helping them. I really was doing nothing but helping them to mirror their own voice, helping them to find their voice and say, "You've had the power all along to speak up. You have the power to share your perspective, and you should share your perspective." And that's truly what we're doing. We're helping our organizations to feel safe to harness conflict, to mitigate risk, and helping their employees to feel safe to share their different perspectives, help them feel safe to surface it to formal channels. And it's a win-win for everyone. And now more than ever, we need this kind of work. So that's a very long explanation as to why and how I got into this profession. But um, I will say it's I'm addicted at this point, and and ultimately, that is what precipitated me to make this decision, um, amongst other things, to start my own company, to start OmbudSana International, where I'm hoping that every organization in the world can invest in some way, whether an internal ombudsman program or externally. They can invest in their people, demonstrate to them that we will put you first. And if you don't feel as if you can bring your best self to work, we will give you the resources to surface what that issue is so that you can help yourself to bring your best self to work. And we get the best potential out of you, and it's a win-win for all.
Yeah. Yeah, because you know what? As you're like talking through this, what I'm discovering as I work with clients or just have conversations with business leaders is that it's a tough time for a lot of businesses right now, right? Like they are having to make really, really, really hard business decisions that might on the surface feel insensitive. So business leader what I discover is business leaders, talk through these hard business decisions weeks after weeks after weeks. They don't just make it like that, right? Most of them. I won't speak on behalf of all, but most of them don't just make hard business decisions with the snap of their fingers. But nobody else in the organization has had time to process those hard business decisions, right? And so then the decisions rolled out, and then there's this like deterioration of like trust and safety because the hard business is like the business still has to run and operate, right? These are a lot of the conversations that I've had more recently. Like the business still has to run and operate. And I understand it's like an and game. I understand this is like really hard to see your friends exit the organization, or this is really hard for you to like reconcile like why there's money being invested over here, but yet like they had to do layoffs, or they had like these are hard conversations of like reconciliation, I'll even call it, of like the human side of business and the business side of business, right? And so this ombuds is like how I would envision it if an organization had it is like somebody could go to them and be like, I'm just having a really hard time like pu putting this together, right? And making it make sense in my heart. Not like I get it in 2 pieces, but like how do you bring it together to like continue to bring your best self to work when you're
Exactly.
kind of the survivor, if you will?
Exactly. But it's actually a two-pronged, and it's one of the great things about being an ombudsman, especially for a larger organization. Um, it isn't just being kind of a passive recipient of people coming to you and listening to their concerns. As an ombuds, I actually sat on various committees, the HR committee, the ER hotline committee, all of these different committees. We used to actually sit down and discuss policy before it was even implemented. Or we would even have an opportunity to, I give a classic example of COVID, right? The vaccination. I don't know whether you had helped some of your clients with respect to that, but being in Texas, it was a very different, policy and receptiveness to masks versus other parts of the country where it wasn't. And being a global company, it was a very polarizing time. And so, what was such a great synergy and partnership between human resources and legal and ombuds and EAP and all these channels was we were involved before the implementation of it to say, how do you think the employees will feel about the implementation of this? Or what are you hearing? And so we used to actually in real time give feedback to HR, even when it came to, the badging in when we were returning to the office, or, stickers that we had. We had to put stickers for who's vaccinated and who's not vaccinated. All of these things. We were giving real-time feedback, which was not going to happen in regular, employee surveys, which was unfiltered, not identified by anyone to say, this is what's really happening, and this is the sentiment and how people are feeling about these policies which are being implemented right now.
Yeah, the real-time sentiment, and I think that's what everyone's trying to get at, right? It's like, okay, I'll do a pulse survey, or I'll have like some AI running in the background to see like the language people are using. And it's like, that's all fine and dandy, except like there's a soul inside of a human that you cannot get without a conversation.
Exactly. AI cannot replace the ombudsman role.
Cannot, like, you cannot replace the soul of somebody with technology. I mean, I believe that. I believe there's great application for those types of things, but I think everyone is trying um, to scale something that just is, it can scale, but you have to have, like, a heart and a soul to understand it, to process it, to see body language, to hear tone, to hear like, there's so much. I even tell my kids this, like, if you're having a tough conversation with a friend, please pick up the phone or meet them, uh, somewhere on a park bench for lunch, coffee, I don't know, but do not do it over text message. Do not do it even a voice memo, right? Like, there's just so much that gets lost in translation when you're not, like, in the room with somebody or virtually, like, having this discussion, right? Because if I'm folding my arms and I'm sitting back and my face is a certain way, there's, like, eh, something I'm communicating without even communicating it, and so, yeah, just like the ombuds importance of that role in the in between. It's
It
like
really is. And I
yeah.
think the world is right now, like you said, you made the point earlier that we're going through, unprecedented change. And sometimes leaders need to make tough decisions. Leaders are human too. And leaders, we weren't just seeing, the people who are reporting to the supervisors or the leaders. Leadership was actually our one of our top visitors to ombuds because the pressure that they're in to be able to handle and stay calm in conflict to manage and navigate a world which is really completely unprecedented. They too need a safe space to navigate and brainstorm solutions. So that pressure release valve that Ombuds offers is just such a powerful impact to the organization that we're helping everyone to really bring up themselves to work and get their maximum productivity and know that it doesn't have any, it's kind of a no consequence conversation. It's not going anywhere. You can just, let's just talk about it and let's help you to be able to surface it where you need to. So it's really is a very, very powerful role within the organization. And I can't say enough about it. Um, I mean, there's a reason why you'll find that there's an increasing number of ombuds in corporations now, because especially in these unprecedented times, people are less comfortable to speak their truth, are less comfortable to speak up. And you don't kind of like the insurance for a company in this sense, because, because you don't want any surprises when there's a safety issue or when there's an issue of rampant harassment or issues that may have impact on the reputation of the company. You don't want that to be a surprise. And so we are kind of the canary in the coal mine. We help to surface that in a way so that nobody knows who said it, but we can mitigate that issue for the organization before it becomes a big one. Like Wells Fargo and Volkswagen, all of these organizations, I always say, if they had an ombudsman office, that issue would not have existed because all of those people that didn't feel safe to surface that rampant fraud and safety issues because of the leaders in the top who were hiding it, that would not have happened if there was an ombuds because we would have been able to surface it right to the top, right to the audit committee, and the attorneys who are in these organizations would say, just as in my organization, they wish they had more ombuds in every part of the organization because we truly help people to feel safe to speak up. And it wouldn't have been too late.
Mhm, mhm. Do you find that there's people, in organizations that are more open to this concept and versus more closed off? Like, is there certain departments that have a tendency to be like, "Oh, yeah, welcome ombuds in," versus, like, are more skeptical? Or is it just the personality of the organization and how I don't know. 'Cause it's such a new concept to me, but it doesn't seem like it should be a new concept to me, and so that's why I'm like, "Why haven't I heard about this before?" Like, are people pushing this out? Because it's just, like, not generally recognizable or they just don't know how to fit it in? I don't know. Because it seems like you said an insurance policy, but even more than that, because it's an active insurance policy. It's not like you're just paying for something that like, oh, I'll use one day when there's an accident, right?
Yeah, I mean, but it's also, think about litigation, how much litigation we're mitigating, right? Which is why lawyers love ombuds, because we were able to mitigate litigation, helping people surface things internally versus just suing the company without having an opportunity to have those conversations internally, right? But honestly, when it really comes down to it, it depends on the type of leadership you have at the top. It isn't actually a particular department. It depends on the leader at the top. And the organizations, the corporations that have ombuds programs, for the most part, ombuds programs were implemented because something bad happened. And so because something happened and the judge basically said, look, those they didn't feel safe going to your hotline. They didn't feel safe going to your supervisors or leaders. You need this safety valve so that they shouldn't have to go to the SEC or any of these organizations. They should feel safe to surface this concern. So all of these organizations, Pfizer, Mars, Chevron, KBR, all these major Fortune 500 companies, created them really because of a lawsuit that happened. And so the judge said, you got to have this. But then the organizations realized the value of the partnership that there was and said, wow, and every year there'd be a case that, oh my gosh, how did the ombuds know about this? We didn't know about it. We'd surface things before anybody else knew about it that were safety issues or real impact to the reputation of the organization. They realized we got to have this insurance. So they kept it, seeing the value over time. So for 20 years, Chevron 30 years, these programs still exist because they 30 years because they recognized that we need that safety valve, right? But the reason why all organizations don't necessarily have it, what they do is they have kind of an alternative version where they think, oh, we have EAP, we therapy, we don't need that. It is not the same thing as therapy. This is truly a safe space about specifically work-related issues that are not being surfaced, that have reputational impact as well. And sometimes there are leaders who may not feel comfortable not being the first ones to know about concerns. And so there's this sometimes a threat factor to say, well, what's to say that sometimes human resources is the issue? It could be that there were cases where unfortunately the human resources business partner was the one who was actually behaving in a way that was abrasive towards the employee. And so unless you're working for a leader that truly wants to lead with integrity, to do the right thing when nobody's looking, that is not afraid to hear feedback and what they're not hearing, and is not afraid to hear those blind spots, it's that kind of a leader that will implement an ombuds program and will see the value of having this safe space for their employees and not afraid to have those tough conversations and truly mitigate risk for the organization. So why it hasn't, I'd say in the university sector, no problem, because it's a lot more, I'd say, less conservative. So most universities have ombuds programs, but in the corporate sector, it has not been as embraced because it's a lot more conservative in when bringing something which is a newer concept. But it's changing now. So
Yeah. Okay, so now you have transitioned. We've talked about large organizations, right? That you've had a significant positive impact on. And now you've transitioned to creating your own ombuds organization, right? And which is awesome. And I just like love other women entrepreneurs. I've been doing my business for a while and I just love when other people find their passion and go do it on their own. It's just So I don't know. I love it so much. Oh, I just like I mean, it's not an easy road. It's a lot of work. But it's just like when you find your passion, it's just so amazing to see in somebody. So, how are you now creating opportunity for maybe smaller organizations or mid-sized organizations? I won't say small, but maybe small, right? To have an opportunity to have an ombuds or a fractional ombuds or an ombuds program, like what does that look like? How do you go into organizations now? And how can some people start to just even start thinking about this concept of an ombuds within their organization?
So there are different models that might be best for the organization, right? So if you're an organization that is, more than I'd say 5, 6,000 employees, you may not need a full-time ombuds. I mean, trust me, you can as an ombuds be very busy from doing, anti-bullying, anti-harassment, feedback training. There's so many things that an ombuds can offer, conflict resolution, right? There's many things that ombuds could do beyond just listening to concerns. But for that size, you probably need an in-house, ideally, ombuds to help support the business and be that safe space. But let's say it's smaller, and some of my clients right now are really small client groups within an investment management firm that are no more than 20, 25 people. Now, you could do eating media mighty mode, say who complained, right? So need to so what's the benefit for that would be to have an external ombuds program. And there are many amazing ombuds programs. And I'm personally the ombuds for this organization. But there's many organizations. I'm also an ombuds fractional for MWI, which is Mediation Institution, also has an ombuds practice. So there's different ways in which you can figure out, do I want to have an external outsourced ombuds that can be a service, a bit like EAP is outsourced. It's an access to an external ombuds that can provide the same service. It's not entirely the same, but for a group that's small, you probably want to have that separation so that they feel safe to have that independence, knowing that what is being shared is not going to be reported back. So it's probably better to go for an external model. So there are different types of models available. But as an ombuds in my program, what I do is I'm helping people to build what I say conflict intelligence. So I'm working with them to remove barriers to conflict at the leadership level, helping them to build their conflict competencies, to lead with responding, learning to choose to respond versus reacting, and really building feedback cultures. So I'm not just going in to help them to implement ombuds or programs. I'm also coming in and doing the work with them to help the leadership to truly harness potential, lean into conflict, have those tough conversations so that they have the tools they need to be able to help their teams to truly thrive and have
Right.
a
So you're like infusing like ombuds culture and competencies into a small leadership team so that they can have a piece of that and do it almost on their own. While it's different, there are competencies that they can possess in order to get people to feel safe and confide in them and do these certain things. That's pretty cool, right? So you're like building up an organizational skill for these smaller organizations.
exactly. Because in the workplace utopia, people wouldn't have any issues, right? They wouldn't need an ombudsman. I'd have no job. But yeah, you're right. But the fact is there is no workplace utopia. And one of the things, I have I call him my equilibria guru, Louis Senior. He started a company called Equilibria, which is helping people to lead with intentionality by understanding, DISC and all of these other companies. They talk about, the red, green, yellow, blue. So when you know your conflict style and you know your color, you know how to manage your ability to navigate, not just leading with intentionality, but learning how to respond when others have a different lens because they're leading with a different e-color than you. Or it's completely changed my leadership. And I bring that into my ombuds practice as well. So it's really helpful for leaders to see how their conflict styles and the lenses they're bringing differ from the rest of their teams and vice versa. And it normalizes having tough conversations, it normalizes having different perspectives, and truly ultimately helps everyone, I believe. I've seen it where leaders truly bring their best self to work.
Well, and I think what ends up happening in the middle of that is that it doesn't become so personal, right? Like, I think so often when you're interacting with somebody who's just like dif different than you and has a different personality style and a different way of going about things and, different perspectives because they've experienced different things, like, there's almost a sense of frustration of, like, and then it becomes personal. It's like, "You're not listening to me," or "You're not understanding me," and you're like, "No, no, no, now I get why they're not understanding me. Okay, let me try a different approach." Or let me, like, just hit it straight on and be like, "Hey, I think we're saying the same thing, but, like, your perspective comes into play and my perspective comes into play, and we're like, sailors in the night. Like, we're just we are saying the same thing, but we're not saying the same thing, and then we have this conflict that really doesn't need to be conflict because we're just different people." So, but that self-awareness of, like, who you are and who the other person is, oh my gosh, I cannot stress that enough in an organization.
It's life changing. And I know, I don't know about the organizations you've worked for, but at least within Chevron, we actually used to display our e colors on our shirts, on our safety equipment. It helps so much because when you're entering any situation, you're presenting to a leader or a room, when and I lead with yellow, which is, is something if someone who's a social doer. I believe I've always loved people and I see things in very big picture. But, if you're working with someone who is leading with green, that when I was a supervisor leading with a team where I had people who led with green, I was intentional to make sure that I was not coming in with my big personality and ready to hug the world. I had to tune myself, wait for the invitation, and communicate with more detail, be more intentional in my communication so that they felt comfortable to share and what they were concerned with, or share their different perspectives. And as a leader, you have to be more aware and know how you're communicating and practice self-awareness so that you're truly choosing how you're showing up for others, and you're choosing how to respond versus just reacting. So it's a very powerful tool, and I bring that into my ombuds practice on a regular basis. How are you preparing for a career discussion or conflict with someone? I always look at that to say it's not enough just to say something. It's not what you say that matters. It also matters how you say it if you want to be heard. And so that's been a very powerful tool for me in my ombuds practice, and I bring that into my work in my practice in ombuds as well.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Okay, so as we wrap up the conversation, if you could think of, like, all of this wisdom that you have and all the experience that you have, if there's, anybody listening and they can walk away with, like, one thing, it could be two. I know I've had guests that are like, "Can I say two?" I'm like, "Whatever you wanna say," right? But the whole point is, like, something simple that people can walk away with and go start doing immediately to start, um, improving the vibe of their organization or their team or having a more positive impact. What would be your suggestion, or what would be your one piece of advice that you would give to anybody listening, leaders, business owners, etc.?
I think especially now in this chaotic world that we're living in, where we could not be in a more polarized environment anywhere. There's no country that's immune. I think as a leader, it's especially important now more than ever before to lead with intentionality. We discussed personal awareness. We discussed grounding. We discussed resilience. People, that phrase by Maya Angelou, and forgive me if I butcher it, is people will forget what you did, people will forget what you said, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And if you can lead with intentionality on how you're choosing to respond to the people that you're working with, especially now, you will find that you will get the best out of your people. You will truly, they will truly feel this universal need to feel seen and heard. And I think we just need more compassion in the workplace now more than ever before. And this too shall pass. And I'm hoping for our children and their future that that the new leadership is no longer command and control and is truly leaders who want to genuinely help everyone, lift everyone up and in this world, and it's all rising ships together. We now truly all leading with intentionality, with legacy, and being kind. So yes, that was a lot of things, but ultimately lead with intentionality, lead with kindness.
Yeah, like you said at the very beginning, like ground yourself before you walk into the doors of your organization or your virtual office or wherever you're going. Like just take a minute and take a breath. However you ground yourself, right? Like if it's meditation or if it's like 3 cleansing breaths or if it's just like physically pausing at the door to just think for a minute in the present moment. Do whatever it takes to kind of ground yourself and then walk in with intention. I think that's amazing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And in fact, there is, I believe her name is, and I'll share the name with you later. I'm sorry, you may want to cut this later. um, I'm sorry. We start again. There is a neurologist that recently shared that there's power in slowing your amygdala and your neurological reaction and your pace by just practicing breath at least 4 times a day. And so I actually am doing it now with my children, and I made it a challenge for us all for 20 days, where 4 times a day we are breathing in for 6 seconds, holding for 6 seconds, and breathing out for 6 seconds, and just doing it 4 times a day. And it has grounded us. It's made us calmer in our communications. We're pretty intense ice hockey family, sports family. And any ice hockey moms out there will know it's pretty intense. Um, you really do need to remember to breathe. And now more than ever, remember that breath. I had no idea that I had not been breathing for the last 25 years.
Sometimes I'll catch myself, like, holding my breath if I'm, like, really intense on something. I'm like, "What am I doing? Breathe." Yeah, exactly. Just breathe. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna try that with my kids. It's a great idea. Great idea. Awesome. Well, I appreciate you so much for spending the time sharing your wisdom and all the goodness that you have to share. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much, Kristi, for having me. Thanks you for the inspiration.
Sana's journey from litigator to organizational ombudsman is such a great reminder that leadership isn't just about making decisions, it's about how people experience those decisions. And I keep coming back to the idea that the ombudsman is really the chief vibe officer. Her role is about creating a space where people feel heard, respected, and safe enough to actually speak up. And then she can suggest actions to affect the culture and engagement, or what I call the vibe of an organization. This isn't a pulse survey, it's real time data that shapes, for good or bad, an organization. It's pretty cool. We talked about grounding, and I love how simple that sounds, but how hard it is to actually do it. to just pause, to just breathe, to just take a moment. And that small reset can completely shift how we show up in a conversation, in a conflict, in a leadership moment. Because the truth is, vibes at work aren't accidental. They're created in the small moments. How we respond when something goes wrong, how we handle tension, how we listen or don't listen. And what Sana brought to this conversation is such a clear reminder that conflict doesn't have to be something we avoid. It can actually be something we get better at, something we build intelligence around. So maybe the takeaway is this: what kind of space are you creating for the people around you? And when things get hard, do people feel safe leaning in, or do they pull back? As always, get curious. Try something this week. And yeah, maybe just breathe for a second before your next conversation. So stay curious, stay courageous, and keep vibing, my friends. If this episode inspired you and you want to see how you can take the next step to creating a better vibe within your organization, I'd love for you to download our complimentary 75 Vibes worksheet. This is a simple tool to create a habit and mindset around creating great vibes in work and life. The best part, it's simple and it works.